Mary O'Donnell was the judge for this year. She'd love to have been here today, but I was too mean to pay for her hotel and train. So she isn't. But we'll have her back in October for the Short Story Festival. So Mary sent these words. Adjudicating any literary competition is a responsibility, even if it's quite a joyful one. I walked around the house for several days with a sheaf of about 20 poems under my arm, reading one after the other, putting them down for a while, then carrying on to read a bit more and think a bit more about each. The competition was what we Irish call fierce, to be honest. There were many marvel-filled poems in the entries for the Gregory O'Donnell International Poetry Competition. I was torn several times, could not quite decide on the first place winner. Then it came to me suddenly that the one poem I returned to more often than any other was written by Katie Griffiths. Well, I didn't know he was a poet called Katie Griffiths at the time, as the competition is anonymous. But this poem kept snagging at me. Its physicality, its imagination, its stretch against all possible conventional ideas about stillbirth. How brilliant it was, this idea of trees being nurtured in a woman's body, and the idea of them being stillborn. 3, in fact, an ash, a hawthorn, and then this birch tree. The language within this poem captured me completely. Its tenderness, as the poet speaks of frontlets after the stillbirth, or the budding of boughs and the birch unfurling. It is the language of extension and retraction as a child, described as ghost birch by the doctor, never comes to full term in the womb. And yet the poem is 1,000,000 miles from the 1,000,001 poems written about birth, wombs, hormones, and subjects which can, in the wrong writer's hands, be extremely boring to me. The final 3 lines of this poem came in 4, 5, and 6 syllabic end-stopped finality. That was so arresting that each time I reread this poem, I had to pause and wait before I could absorb anything else on the potential shortlist. That was a sign for me that this poem was doing what good poems tend to do. It was disturbing me. It was making me see a subject we are all familiar with, but in a completely different light. Its language controlled by powerful yet restrained language. Its central imaginative conceit affecting and utterly convincing. It was the most beautiful thing I had read when I finally realised what I had in my hands. Congratulations to Katie Griffiths, whose poetry, published by Nine Arts Press, I have found and been reading since.
Gosh, thank you so much. I have to say I'm absolutely thrilled to be here at this amazing poetry festival. So thank you, Patrick Cotter, and all the team at the Munster Literature Centre for a really sparkling schedule of events and for incredibly generous hospitality. Of course, it's a huge honour to win the Gregory O'Donnell, not least because of the illustrious poets who've won it before me and in whose footsteps I now tread. My profound gratitude goes to Mary O'Donnell for choosing my poem. Also, before I begin, I just want to congratulate Gwen and Partridge as well for their successes. Before I stillbirthed the birch, I was great with tree and thought myself a branch line, everything connected. Do you want to know? I peered at the scan, perfect besom of tickling twigs. A bog birch, I suggested. A ghost birch, said the doctor with huge eyes. Tree of inference, tree of surmise, first birch of my lineage, its nursery prepared, its earth turned. But when my stomach grew misshapen from the butting of boughs on a wind-raged night, I was alarmed, the birch unfurling in a behindhand ambulance, where my hips moved, and I was delivered of tree, the birth credible for a moment. Tiny translucence, the froglets I curl around. Before I stillbirthed the birch and the mess, bloodied, greened, flushed, there'd been the ash, nearly full term, and the hawthorn lacerating my insides. Elderly gravida, they explained, unable to sustain. But this time, a ghost birch that would have caught the darkness off guard. I drain a water glass. This is the catalogue of it all. This is the uphill of it all. My branchless gaze, my birchless morning, my barkless belly pinched. Well, if that poem is about an inability to bring forth, or perhaps about the pain of Mother Earth, maybe, in a current climate crisis, then any of us might be forgiven for asking for divine help or intervention. However, this next is called divine non-intervention. It sours your day, leaves a bad smell in the stairwell. What supreme being? Unless still lounging on Mount Olympus, dysfunctional. Certainly mauled by all sides, pulled apart like moth wings, expanding to the required diameter, or none at all. Each time you reach for the remote, you're trapped alive. To be frank, the headlines terrify. It seems the Almighty's doing improv now. Mother of God, you say, lighting a candle when clearly the only remaining option is to address a responsible adult. Mother of God, what on earth were you thinking? Carrying him until he emptied you. It seems that many conflicts around the globe are spearheaded by men with, let's say, singular purpose. During the time of the war in the former Yugoslavia, I was lucky enough, and I use that word very advisedly, I was lucky enough to spend time in that part of the world working with a charity looking after refugees. And if you remember, Radovan Karadzic was the leader of the Bosnian Serbs and later convicted of war crimes at The Hague. He was characterized by a head of very, very thick, luxuriant hair. And this next poem is an amalgam of things I witnessed, as well as imagining what it would be like to be tasked with cutting his hair. Two places are mentioned, Vukovar, which is in northern Croatia, and Manjaca, a prison camp from where Shocking photos reached the news of captives, painfully thin men whose heads had been shaven. A haircut for Radovan Karadzic before the International War Crimes Tribunal. When it comes to style, I cannot decide. Steady my scissors behind this neck where hairs thicken to a wayward mane tinged brute metallic. Of colourings, I know something. Once spotted 2 white-headed children from Vukovar on the bus. I'd never thought how terror can seed, grow its flora through a scalp. Later, in a fuggy gymnasium, home to 300 hauled there as freight, 4 days without food or water, I met young Kemal, his hair confettied with white eggs of lice. He greeted me by kicking my shins, not knowing a news photo of his elder brother was the last sighting across barbed wire. His brother coiffed at Manyatsa, eyes to the ground, shorn by smirking captors. I saw how the sudden sentence of baldness, how the head in its new nakedness did not subtract him, but praised him to a distinctive line drawing. Cutting implements heat my hand. My client waits, hair barging his collar. When it comes to style, I cannot decide. I also am sure I cannot fathom what goes on in the minds of warmongers, although the mind is a subject that really fascinates me. The Sunday Night Times newspaper in the UK runs a feature called Relative Values, in which 2 family members talk about each other or perhaps even dish the dirt on each other. In this next poem, called Relative Values, Me and Consciousness, the 2 relatives are, and I think you guessed it, me and consciousness. First up, it's consciousness speaking. Me never got over the custody battle I had with mind, nor how it made headlines at the time. I suggested a compensatory dog. Me named it Bishop, not for godliness, but for the diagonal moves. It's true we're often at loggerheads, like being locked inside a bathroom with no reason to come out. I'll give context, leave teasers. I support the projects me has nurtured since childhood. Yes, I enjoy skullduggery, and I'm perhaps too tickled each time me rages or rails. Still, I watch, I love, attentive as a wasp that noses sweet cups. Me can see through this and tries not to drink. And now the turn of me to say a few words. It's a tussle. The thing is, consciousness always steps it up after catching wind of me, then keeps me awake all night wondering which of us is exempt from burning out. Consciousness can be less inflammatory and lie stumm, like a ball of wool in a white basket. But if I try to level with consciousness, it's only to inhabit more fully the mirage. And what to do now consciousness has found the cubby hole where I've hid everything. There's no escape. Wrench off a wedding ring and the finger stays runnelled. Consciousness is the in-joke that swallows me whole. Sometimes you just need to get away from all of this, don't you? What's going on in the world. Maybe go on a retreat like this one in southern Spain. Retreat. The answer to everything, 3 green smoothies and 5 herbal teas per day with downward dogs at dawn. I didn't count on having to go naked into the pool. Paddled lengths covertly at 5 a.m. We all bonded, sort of, became near serene, did mountain poses by night on the roof. Someone tapped a finger piano and invented a tune about toes, and I leaned back, divested. And the stars, not the starveling blip above my home, but these, did you ever see such a curdle, huddle, blancmange overhead? One day we encouraged each other up a knee-deep river, steps splashing over slithery rocks high above Capilera. Thank heavens this was August and not the spring melt, or we'd have been a limb lash down to Orchiva. Evenings, I did rounds of the cells, checking each inmate's piss bucket and birch switch. Oh, wait. That was another retreat at a different time. A previous life, yes. Yes, for we discussed birth before birth. But how to get a single destiny right if uninvited incarnations can screw up the show? And how to magic a future when unduly besotted with a past? While the stars jigged and hornswoggled time, we belted out more body part ballads, and truly my past looked lousy and foul. I dreamt of having been neither Queen Nefertiti nor my great uncle loading a Hotchkiss gun at the Somme, but just that one mother who stood and stood and stood. Not everyone is lucky enough to escape from things and go on retreats or even get away from themselves. Many here, I'm sure, will know someone who has been through, we could call it a dark night of the soul. And sometimes it's very hard to know what to do if you're a bystander, particularly if it seems to us that the person in question does not want to budge from their state of mind. Moonbather. She is slink and fall, a trespass in the orchard that wrong-foots the trees. Her darkness is famished. She needs the kind of moon you grind in your teeth, the kind of moon that never consoles. How she wants to feel sorry for you, feeling sorry for her, and all the light you fail to exchange. Under somber whims, her reason is permeable. See how readily she strips down and becomes moonlocked, innermost, and full of retraction. She wants the kind of moon that saturates, the kind that rains calamitous pieces. Will you try to save her? Of course, you'll drop footholds and rungs. You'll call from your sill, "Sister, sister, shake out your limbs." I spent all my childhood and adolescence in Canada, but my parents are both from Belfast. After their retirement from work, they returned to Northern Ireland, and I think both would have loved to be here today. Sadly not possible, although I do have family here, my sister and my husband. My dad died quite a while ago, and I lost my mother only a few months ago. My mother never went to university, but she had a keen intellect and a crystal clear memory. Her life took her back and forth across the Atlantic a number of times, but she remained a proud Ulster woman. She was actually born a year before the partition of Ireland and received greetings and medals from the President of Ireland several times for her longevity. I wrote and read a poem at her funeral, and although it was a self-commission, it was perhaps the most important poem I've ever written in my life so far. It would be a great honour to share it with you today. I close my set with it, so thank you so much for listening. Our mother's wooden spoon. The kind of spoon that every kitchen craves, with dents of wear and travel, deep cracks in its bowl, and a groove along its neck from energetic tapping many times against a saucepan's side. Spoon of purpose, spoon of comfort, spoon of care, passed to sisters from a mother who has stood before us, transforming oats to steaming porridge and setting each day's path correct. The amounts have shrunk but are precise, 1/3 of a cup of oats to 2/3 water, topped with milk, for taste, for calories, and to make the substance runnier these days. It was porridge, she swears, that kept her alive when she was gravely ill, aged 5. And porridge still sustains her in these extra years she did not expect. In this time of grace, where we have burned through all awkwardnesses, all bumps, all glitches, we are pared back to nothing but understanding and forgiveness meted out long ago. Clever work of nourishment, blessed task of nourishment that grants us the chance to give back to a mother who may later fall asleep mid-morning, her head bent forward, pen pulsed over Sudoku, her neck at an awkward angle. She is beautiful in vulnerability, transcendent of her frailty, renewed in her capacity to life. Is she at peace with what lies ahead, this vastness to come? And how best do we reassure, accompany, hold? I cannot say, though one Wednesday night of a December yet to be, in a first slip into between worlds, she will ask if we can drive her home to the farm at Ballybean. I take the wooden spoon, for it is still autumn in her kitchen, and stir as my sister on other days stirs, the porridge starting to pluck and crying out for not the sacrilege of sugar, but salt, salt of her Ulster Scots forebears, and not a few measly grains, instead a dollop that sits bold and forthright in your hand. Thank you.